Sue Bird, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Well, thank you for coming on the rematch and thank you for being a part of my book. I want to start off with, four-time WNBA champion, you know what I mean? 11-time WNBA All-Star, like amazing. You're just trying to break every record. I want to ask you, which championship was the most meaningful? Now, this is a tough question because I'm sure they all were very meaningful, but which one was the most meaningful of the four that you won?
I know I usually joke. I'm like, this is like asking parents their favorite child.
Right.
I now know how rude that was of me to ask my mom. Like, your daughter.
I hear you.
No, I'm joking. But I actually do have an answer. And it's not an easy choice. But I think the WNBA championship that we won in 2018 is probably always going to be like a little more meaningful just because very quickly our franchise was starting a rebuild. In 2015. And it was like we went younger, all of our veteran older players either left or got traded, and we were essentially starting over. And the truth is, in that moment, I stayed on board. And I was like, all right, this is like my parting role is to make sure the franchise is in good hands, to keep the culture going.
Right.
So to all of a sudden be in the final 3 years later, I didn't even expect to make the playoffs for the remainder of my career. So to actually win it in such a short time was absolutely incredible.
Wow. Okay, that's great. That's great. And and talk a little bit before we go about last year's bubble season, because that was a special season as well. So talk about winning the championship in the bubble season, especially with everything that was going on.
Right. I mean, that's what's always going to give it, like, some people are like, oh, these bubble seasons have an asterisk. I was like, you're right, they do. It was way harder.
Right.
It was way harder because we obviously as athletes have goals on the court. You're trying to like stay mentally and physically ready for the grind of a season, the grind of a playoff run. But simultaneously, we were there for a bigger purpose.
Right.
And that also requires like another level of energy, of like emotional energy. So it was a tough balance. And these topics are obviously, very important in our society, but I think for a lot of people can be difficult and draining at times. And I'm sure we'll touch on it, but that was one of the reasons why our league decided to take that pause when the Milwaukee Bucks did. Because I think a lot of people were like actually just like in need of a rest.
Right.
Because it was just a lot. So being able to win, but also get a lot of work done off the court, 2020 is, like I said, the asterisk, that means it was special.
Right. You talked about taking a pause. And during that time, that's when we were both on Meet the Press.
Yeah.
Last summer. And, after just to set the scene, the footage of Jacob Blake, was released, being shot multiple times in the back by Kenosha police. And that went viral. And, on Meet the Press, you mentioned how you, as a white person, would talk and listen to the pain of your Black teammates and the impact that had on you. And, when you're talking on Meet the Press, you don't know if you should go long or if you should, cut it short. But I wanted you to expound a little bit more on that point that you made.
Yeah, so I think for me, my journey in this world, if you will, like I've been really lucky to be exposed to a lot of different cultures, both just from being a basketball player growing up in New York. Like I went to school in Queens. I was, from Long Island, which was predominantly white, but then growing up in Queens and going to high school there, a lot of my teammates were obviously Black. So like I've experienced some different worlds there. Playing in Russia, just been exposed to tons of different culture. And the only reason why I bring that up is I feel like I have like a fairly well-rounded outlook.
Okay.
Simultaneously, when I talk to my Black teammates, especially the last 6, 7, 8, however long, honestly, pandemic time, I'm like, what day is it?
Right.
So the last year or so, what I've realized is like I can watch the footage. I mean, to be honest, I actually don't like watching footage of like, Blake, for example, but I can theoretically watch that footage and be appalled and disgusted and sad and hurt. And yet listening to my teammates and listening to how it makes them feel, and seeing that it's bringing up old trauma for them. They're being like re-traumatized by it because everybody has a story, whether directly with them or a family member or a friend, whether it's police brutality or racism, a lot of my teammates have a story. And so to see that aspect of it, I'm not going to be able to experience that. I'm not going to be able to, relate to that in that way. So that's when I know it's like, that's when you have to listen. That's when my learning curve kicks in. And that's when I realize two things. One, there's times to like shut up and listen, to be honest, and take a step back. And then as a white person, a white player in this moment, there's times where I can be like help amplify, using my platform, using my voice. But that was really the learning process, understanding in that moment that this was like a re-traumatization that was happening.
Right.
So just being a part of that and seeing it firsthand, it helped me learn, which is a huge thing. You got to be educated, but also it helped me see where I can help.
It's interesting. Going back to Meet the Press, we were on there, and Chuck Todd asked about, could we do more, and do I have the feeling that you want to do more? And my response kind of threw him off a little bit, and I was like, of course. And I made it personal, and I talked about my family and my daughter and what I think about with my son. And if you notice watching it, it kind of threw him a little bit, and he kind of paused for a little while, didn't quite know. But that's why it's when you talk about white privilege, sometimes that's a topic that's a little bit of a hot button topic if people don't quite understand what it means. But the privilege to not have to think about your children and your family anytime something like this happens, that's a privilege, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's one that I think, this is just my observations, but it's something about like, well, I feel like part of my privilege is now, or part of the privilege I've gotten is now what I need to use, right? Like I need to use that privilege, if you will, in ways to make positive impact. On the other side of it, it's something about when you tell somebody they've had privilege, they like internalize that as if they didn't work hard.
Right.
As if like the things they got, they didn't work hard for them, or they didn't, like they got it the wrong way, or they were given it. And I'm like, oh no, you worked hard. Like I don't think anybody worked hard.
Right.
But you still had privilege.
Right.
Like those two things exist at the same time. And I think some people don't, they view them as like it's either one or the other, and it's not.
And it's interesting because a lot of times you'll hear people say, well, I didn't come from money. They're like, okay, that's cool, but this doesn't have anything to do with money. I mean, I played ball for over a decade in the NBA, so I have money, but when my son is stopped by the police, the amount of money that I have doesn't save him. And that's the part that, that connection that is missed sometimes. They think it's just monetary.
Well, so it's interesting you say that because this is something that I think I knew, like somewhere in the back of my head, I knew, but it was when I believe it was one of the members of our executive committee. I'm on the executive committee for the WNBA. And I think it was Lasia Clarendon who first said back in March when we were, or maybe more like, it was actually more like May, June, when we were in these negotiations about wanting Breonna Taylor on our jersey, about wanting Say Her Name on our shooting shirt, Black Lives Matter on the court. And she said it, and a lot of athletes have said it, but it really hit home hearing, like having this like one-on-one conversation. And she's like, when I take my uniform off, she's like, I am Breonna Taylor. And that's when it, for me, it was kind of like, oh, like, yeah.
Right.
Like so to your point, doesn't matter.
Right.
Money, no money, like fame, no fame,
right.
Status, no status. Like this is the reality for Black people in our country.
And talk to me about the conversations that you have with other white people. Like I know because with other white teammates, it's a little bit different because y'all have a certain bond. So it's different. But outside of basketball, your conversations with other white people where you're trying to maybe explain to them, or they don't get it, or they do get it. Just share some experiences that you have, because I think it's really important for with white people who do get it, talking to other white people who don't get it. I think it's really, really important. So talk to me about that experience.
Yeah. So I've definitely had some, interesting / tough conversations. And this is where, like, for me, my little process with this is because I explained my journey a little bit earlier, like there were just certain things that I thought like everybody knew. You know what I mean? Like whether it's about Black culture or like, the walk maybe of a Black person in our country, just because I've been able to listen to stories. I've heard firsthand different experiences. I almost took for granted knowing that, and also simultaneously it really opened my eyes to how little it's talked about in our like mainstream kind of media or just like in society. So a lot of the conversations are basically, I can't really pull specific right now, but a lot of them are just kind of like me sharing a story, maybe of that a teammate told me, and a friend or a family member being like, really? Yeah, what do you mean? So a lot of times it comes from, in the conversations I've had with friends and family, it comes from a place of like ignorance, I guess. Like they just don't know. But I'm like, that's the thing. You didn't have to know. You didn't know, but like you didn't need to go know.
Right.
I don't know if that's worded right, but there was no need for you to go do that. Whereas like a lot of minorities in our world, they know what white culture is about.
Right.
What it is to be white. They see it, it's around them, and they have to like, in the past, hopefully that changes obviously, but they've had to like kind of learn how to like play in the white world, if you will. I don't know.
Right. No, definitely.
Yeah. So that it's like, so for me, I feel like what I've been able to do is just like pass these stories on, share experiences that I've heard from, my teammates or my friends who are Black, and use them to have these like moments, these teaching moments, to open, my white friends' eyes, so to speak.
Yeah, and in sports, that's one thing about basketball, sports just in general. It's a way that you'll be introduced to people who maybe you wouldn't have crossed otherwise. And I think that a lot of times when you're an athlete and you have those experiences, people are outside of athletics, they're not interacting with people from different cultures the same way that we are, and that plays a big difference. Do you agree?
Oh, I literally was just talking about this yesterday. To me, the whole like shut up and dribble thing.
Right.
I'm like, yo, we have it figured out in sports. You guys like all like politicians, like all kinds of people, like you should come see how sports teams interact, how we operate. To me, it's like, and I'm sure you could speak to this. You've been on teams where people didn't like each other.
Of course.
That's what it is. But simultaneously, the culture of sports and the culture of team sports is, regardless of you like them, you don't like them, like you believe what they say, you agree, you don't agree, whatever it is, you're like, okay, but no, we're all equal on this team. We're all here trying to win. So we have to push these things to the side and do what's best for the team.
Right.
Like that, to me, thematically, is how the whole world should operate.
Definitely.
And so like, tell me to shut up and dribble. I'm like, oh, I've lived in this ecosystem where I see that you're Black. I know that I'm white. It's not that we don't see it. We do see it. But we respect it, and we're here for the better of the team, no matter what. You know what I mean?
I do, and it's interesting. It's interesting in like 2021. You know what I mean? That you would have people who only interact with Black people from what they see in the movies and TV and music. Still, like now, like I can understand maybe going back to the 60s, like our parents' age, but right now, there's people who have no interaction with Black people at all, except for what they see on TV. That's amazing to me.
I know. And I think, again, I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine about this. And it's like, as messed up as what's happened in the last year, obviously beyond, but the last year has been at the forefront. And is like terrible as like the insurrection was. It pulled back the veil, and now we're forced to deal with it. So my hope is that because we're forced to deal with it now, it can start like real change. Not just like this Band-Aid change. Like, oh yeah, we'll just like fix this with a Band-Aid. Like, no, we need like real surgery here.
Right, I agree.
Cover it up. So that's kind of the hope, I think. I'm sure a lot of people feel that way.
Definitely. So let's pivot to specifically the WNBA and what you all have accomplished. I mean, consistently have accomplished, but I don't think that it's ever really gotten enough, praise, and because honestly, I'm looking at it from what the NBA accomplished last year and what they did in the bubble, the media blackout kind of. They took that directly from y'all a few years ago, which y'all did after the back-to-back murders of Philando Castile and Alton Sterling, and it was amazing to me that it wasn't just a few players here and a few players there. All of y'all did it. So my first question, what I keep asking, I asked Renee Montgomery this, I asked Swin Cash this, I always ask, How did y'all do that to get everybody on board? Because nobody has done that. Like, no, not for everyone to be on board. You know, remember when Kaepernick first took a knee, he was out there by himself for a while. You know what I mean? And y'all have players, foreign players that aren't even from here, don't even know, like they play here for the season and they go back overseas. But you educated them and then they stood with you. I just thought it was amazing. So break down to me how you are able to consistently accomplish this.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is just like how we've grown up in this world as female athletes and like what that walk is and the experiences we have. Sometimes I joke like with the whole shut up and dribble. I'm kind of like, we tried. We tried to be basketball players. Y'all wouldn't let us.
Right.
Like, you know, we're judged on how we look, the color of our skin, our sexual orientation, like all these things, what we can't do on the court. So I think we all have developed this fight in us. And what 2016, which you brought up, I think really taught us was we're way more powerful when we're one voice. So like, you know, to your point with Colin, it's like, it's just way more powerful had the whole league done it.
Right.
It just would have been. And it actually makes the messages more powerful. And sadly, we have to talk about punishment in a way. But like, you can't punish the whole league.
Right.
They tried to in 2016. Right. They tried to fine us for the t-shirts. Right. And they had to take it back. It's just, you can't. It's too hard. We're so much stronger together. So I think 2016 showed us that because, you know, it was actually Minnesota who kind of started it with their t-shirts, wearing them first, obviously because of what happened in Minnesota directly in Minneapolis.
Right.
And then New York Liberty did it. And then our whole league kind of got on board. And it was when the whole league got on board that we knew we could, for lack of a better, fight the league. Right. So when this year came around, we already knew from experience. We knew like it's better if we're all together.
Right.
I'll say this: the one thing that was good about the bubble is we're all in the same place at the same time. So it was like, yo, we got a Zoom. We're in quarantine, and we have a Zoom at 8 p.m. And I know you're not doing anything. Like you better be on that Zoom.
Right.
So it's good to like all be in the same place at the same time. That helped with the organizational part of it, but we know we have to be unified. So when the Washington Mystics walked in the arena with the bullet holes on their back, and they were making a stance, and they were really the first team that day that was like, we don't want to play. And we have conversations, and we're open and we're honest. We're very lucky in that we're all on the same page on what we want to do, or like not what what we're representing, what our values are. You know, of course, there's conversation on the how. Should we do this? Should we do that? And there's conversations there.
Right.
When you have the same values, those conversations are easy.
Got you.
So there was conversation. I mean, it had to happen fast, within like an hour. People on the phone, people calling this, what should we do? Should we do this? Should we do that? But very quickly, once it became clear that one team didn't want to play, it was like, then none of us played. And I think that's just like through experience, knowing that we're stronger, you know, unified, and we kind of just, that's how we operate.
That's amazing. I got to honestly give y'all so much credit for that. I mean, because that's what other organizations should model themselves after, the way that you all operate. I mean, and even how you operated with Kelly Loeffler, and that, talk about that, because that also was amazing, because, you know, this is going against someone who, you know, and I don't like to use the word owner for obvious reasons, but she is, you know, the one of the CEOs of the team, you know, and she comes out, right, the majority. So she comes out about this statement. Just walk me through it. So back, Breonna Taylor happened, and, you know, everybody was talking about it. And then she made the statement to pretty much say that, you know, we shouldn't be injecting politics into athletics. And, you know, but she said we should have an American flag on it. And I was like, well, isn't that politics? So, but
it unites us.
Right.
That was your tagline.
Right. Walk me through what happened and the way that you all banded together in that, because really, you know, there's so much that could be uncovered with that, because that needs to be examined, because Warnock was polling at 9% before y'all got involved. That has to continue to be repeated. He was polling at 9%. Basically, nobody know about him like that. You know what I mean? So talk to me about how that all came about.
Yeah, sure. So like you said, we were being told not to make political statements by supporting Black Lives Matter, by say her name, by Breonna Taylor on our shirts, on the back of our jerseys.
Mm-hmm.
And so what was interesting was there was in the first 24 hours. So like you said, Kelly Loeffler wrote, she wrote a letter.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the form is. She wrote a letter to our commissioner.
Okay.
Once that came out, those first 24 hours, I think a lot of us, pretty much all of us, had like very knee-jerk emotional, like, get her out.
Right.
Donald swirling all over again.
Right.
That type of vibe.
Mm-hmm.
But what kind of like quickly came to the forefront was, wait a minute, like a stop in our tracks moment, like, wait a minute. She's actually using us, because the more we bark at her
Mm-hmm.
and, be outraged,
Mm-hmm.
the more Fox News is going to call her and be like, hey, you want to come on our show and talk about it?
Right.
And how she can get more notoriety, get more coverage,
Mm-hmm.
and also prove to her base
Mm-hmm.
just how, like, for lack of a better, Trumpy she is.
Right. That's a good term.
Yeah, because in those 24 hours, it was actually brought to my attention by a family member that he was using us. It never really, and I was like, oh my God. I was like, you're right.
Right.
And I started Googling, our EC started talking, and Reverend Warnock actually put out a press release, like a statement,
Mm-hmm.
calling her out on this. And I was like, that's the guy. I was like, we're aligned. And then we obviously had to do like our own little vetting process,
Right.
and see what he was about. And as it turned out, and as the world now knows, and definitely Georgia now knows, like, he's an amazing candidate, now an amazing senator.
Mm-hmm.
Our values align across the board.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you name it, values align. And it just felt like, okay, so the louder we are against her is actually going to help her.
Mm-hmm.
With kind of this pawn. So what if we just like redirect and don't get in some like political spat? And I always joke, I'm like, who the hell are we to get in like a political argument? Like, I'm not trying to do that. Like, that's not my strength.
Right.
Because listen, she's a politician, and she's obviously a million or billionaire.
Right.
So she's got a lot of political strategists on her side. I'm not trying to fight that.
Mm-hmm.
So we all collectively redirected, got right back on the path of what we went to the bubble for, which was all the things I've named, social justice. And it was also like, wait a minute, we also talk about voting a lot. So it just like, it all aligned. And it was like, you know what, we're going to continue our messaging. We're going to forget this. But what we're also going to do is talk about voting and then talk about this candidate that we like. And then it's like, listen, I'm not going to lie. The byproduct is if he wins, she doesn't.
Right.
And that to me is, in some ways, getting her out of the Senate has more meaning for all of us than getting her out of the WNBA, which I'm sure is going to happen, by the way. So it wasn't like one or the other.
Right.
In that moment, the focus needed to be on the Senate seat, not the ownership, because that's what she wanted. She wanted that ownership fight. We weren't having that fight. We got right back on track to what we got there for. And I think it was hard to quiet down the players at first, because like I said, everybody, myself included, I tweeted, everybody kind of was a little about it.
Right.
Once we kind of realized like, oh, this is more impactful, boom, hit the ground running, everybody on board. So it was such a unique time, but also speaks to what we were talking about earlier with just like how organized we are, how strategic we are, and how we know when we're all doing it together, it's way more powerful. That's
amazing. And so did y'all try to meet with her? Like, what did she try to address you all after she made nothing? No.
Honestly, wow. This is my favorite part. So my favorite part is we met with Warnock. We had multiple Zoom calls.
Yeah.
Got to know him. That was, like I said, we weren't just going to support someone just to support someone. That was what it was about. No, and my favorite part is the statement she put out after we kind of got angry at her. I don't even remember what it said, but the 4 or 5 line statement she put out after we wore the Warnock t-shirts and they asked her about it, she essentially just put out the same statement. And I was like, yes. There really was nothing to say at that point.
Right.
What was she gonna say? We weren't talking about her. We were just talking about him.
Right. That's great.
That felt good.
That's great. And tell me about the work that y'all did specifically with Stacey Abrams too.
Yeah. You can't get lost in any of this. So when I say the stars align, I've never in my life experienced something where everything just fell into place. Because, like I said, once we found Warnock, as it turns out, two things. One, Stacey Abrams had already endorsed him, and they're like homies. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So, and Stacey Abrams, like they've known each other forever. Obviously, have the Georgia connection. And Stacey Abrams is one of our player advisory, one of our. I forget what the name of it. She's one of the advisors on our council to our union.
Okay, got you.
Board of advisors. That's
Board of advisors.
All right. Advisors.
I got you.
We have direct line contact to her.
Oh.
And so on that very first Zoom, she was there as kind of like, you know, like just like a middleman, you know, someone who can introduce the Reverend to us. She can introduce us to the Reverend. And it was really nice to have that. And like I said, like this world of politics, like obviously everybody's life is political, but some people are more read up on it than others. So it was really nice to have somebody guide us. And that's where Stacey Abrams, I mean, listen, Stacey Abrams' role in this cannot be undertold or undersold. But that in that moment was where she played a huge role for us. And then also, very quickly, our former president, Lisa Borders, who knows the players, obviously, she was our president, she was working directly with Reverend Warnock's campaign as well. So it was like, oh, Lisa is, you know, working on his campaign. It was like, oh my God, like all these people we know and trust are with this man and behind this man. So just like I said, stars align.
Wow, that's great. Absolutely amazing the way that you all organize. Honestly, it needs to be written about more. And I'm sure as we go back and we're looking at, looking back on athlete activism and things of that nature, it will be, examined the way that you all operate, because it's absolutely amazing. But I just want to thank you for everything you stand for. The way you stand as an ally, the way you speak to white privilege, speak to other. I mean, the whole thing. I think it's really amazing, and I think that what you do is that you influence other white people, and they will hear you differently than they would. That's just the nature of it. Because that's why we need white allies. Because there's some certain things. It doesn't matter if LeBron says it. It doesn't matter if Steph Curry says it. They're only going to hear it if Popovich says it or Mark Cuban. That's just the way that it is. So you having the moral courage to be able to stand on things that might not necessarily directly impact you, but have empathy to be able to say, well, it's still wrong that impacts anybody. And that's what creating empathy is all about. So I really thank you for that. All right, one more basketball question, and then so your favorite point guards, both in the WNBA and in the NBA. Your favorite point guards. I'll give you a chance to think about it, and I'll just talk a little bit because the point guard is such a special position, and they're so different and everything like that. But who are your favorite in the WNBA and in the NBA?
Okay, so I'll start NBA.
Okay.
And I kind of have like categories, so I have three that come to mind.
Okay.
My favorite player of all time is Mike Bibby.
Okay.
So I discovered Mike Bibby probably the same time everybody else did, when he was making that championship run in Arizona. I was in high school, and he's not that much older than me, so it wasn't like I grew up watching him.
Right.
The second I started watching him, the three things that stuck out, I was like, wait a minute, he wears number 10.
Okay.
Number 10. I was like, boom.
Right.
Come to find out, I've actually become friends with him like later, and come to find out, like he's like really passionate about the number 10. Him and his friends have this thing called Team Dime, like their little crew. And I was like, yes, I knew I liked you for a reason. He's bow-legged. I'm bow-legged.
Okay.
And the more serious part is, he to me is one of the first, not the only, not the last, obviously, but like one of the first scoring point guards. A point guard who's running the show but can score. Okay. And that's like how I view myself. I'm probably more point guard. He's probably more scorer, but still there's like a mixture there that I've always seen in his game that I really liked. So he's always been one of my favorites. Okay. All right. Two, these ones will be quick. I mean, John Stockton. Okay. It's like the OG. How do you not? And when I broke the assist record in the WNBA, because he's the assist holder in the NBA, he actually called
Oh.
Like, oh, I'm always gonna love you now. The dopest thing ever.
That's cool. That's cool.
And then the player though that like I would pay to watch, and I don't know about you, but as like an athlete, that to me like means a lot because we usually don't have to pay to go see people watch. It's a benefit. It's a plus.
Right.
You know. So like, the player that no matter is Kyrie Irving. Like, he's like right now current player, my favorite to watch. Find him so entertaining. The things he does. You know what I mean? It's like him, Steph Curry. They're like literally changing the game of basketball.
Right.
Kyrie for a lot of reasons, but that's one of them. Okay, on the WNBA side, yeah, if we go OG, I mean, like, so talk about paying to watch someone play. Like Tisha Panachero was just so entertaining as a player.
Right.
So, and I got to play with her. Obviously, I played against her for a number of years, but I got to play with her in Russia, and it was just fun to like see how she operated, see how she approached the game, how intelligent, how smart. I loved about her game, and then just the flashiness. It was exciting to watch.
Yep.
But my favorite of all time is probably Lindsay Whalen because we just were like of a similar age, and we were kind of like, we were like the point guard bar. We were the ones, developing that bar. And every time she raised it up, I had to meet it. And every time I raised it up, she had to meet it. And it was good to have somebody like that, like playing at the same time, where you could battle, where you could compare. But then simultaneously on the national team, we got to be teammates.
Right.
So it was like, we're homies too. So it was like a fun relationship in that way.
That's great. That's great. That's great. Oh, that was a great breakdown. No, I know a lot. That's fantastic. So, well, listen, like I said, I appreciate you. And thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for being in my book, and keep doing what you're doing. Much respect to you.
Same. Right back at you. Thank you.
All right.